You're listening to Inflow and On Fire, your weekly podcast companion for finding your flow and stoking your inner fire. I'm your host, Quinn Curtis, artist, mother of 5, and aspiring children's book author illustrator. Every month, our soulful discussions spark from a relevant fairy tale or myth. These help us better understand how to navigate our inner worlds and everyday lives so that we can live more joyfully, bring those big and beautiful dreams to life, and make the world a better place. Want to get the most out of this episode? Well, be sure to snag the free gorgeous study guide in the show notes that includes a written copy of the fairy tale or myth, soulful journaling questions, and other additional juicy resources. This episode is for you if you're seeking greater wholeness in your life. You could use more permission to trust yourself on a deeper level. You want to better understand our need for myth and symbols to help us better navigate the modern era. Or maybe you're interested in mythology, fairy tales, and their relation to psychology, religion, growth, and development. Or you're looking for more of the divine feminine, the world. Or simply you may just want some good vibes and want to enjoy an interesting, deep discussion around the Selkie myth, especially better understanding the history of it and its everyday modern application. My special guest today is Maxine Hanks, who is a historian and theologian who researches and writes about gender and religion, especially recovering and integrating the feminine in religion and culture. She did her bachelor's work in gender studies and master's work in history and in chaplaincy, with further graduate studies in theology and liturgy at Harvard Divinity and Holy Cross. Her work is focused on female or feminine aspects of theology and religious practice. She is interested in how myth and archetype in religion shape gender and identity and practice, and how history and theology can recover and integrate subverted aspects of a religion. I wanted to bring her on the show because of her lived experience with the themes of the Selkie myth. I think her spiritual journey is so fascinating and inspirational, especially with how deeply she's gone to search for the divine feminine in such a wide, amazing variety of places. So I hope you enjoy our discussion. Maxine, I'm so excited for you to join me today. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. I love this podcast of yours on the Mythic.
Oh, yeah. We were talking right before I hit record about just how excited we were both to just talk myth today. Like, what an exciting subject that is for both of us. I'd love, actually, as we first dive into the subject, maybe if you could share a little bit of your passion for myth. Like, where does it come from for you, and why do you love this subject?
Oh my gosh. Because myth and symbol contain truth. There's a wonderful passage from the Gospel of Philip that says that truth has to come into the world clothed in type and symbol because human beings can't understand truth in any other way, and that we have to then extract the truth or resurrect the truth back out of the myth and symbol. And I love that because myth and symbol and archetype hold so much that can't be expressed in words. That's not literal. And so there are endless interpretations and meanings that you can draw out of myth and symbol. Whereas if you're reading words, it's more literal, and it's kind of more pinned down to one interpretation. There is not one true interpretation of any myth or symbol. It is open to so many, and depending on how you experience it and how you experience it in your life, each one of us brings a different interpretation and meaning to myth and symbol. And so I love that it cannot be limited. It can't be controlled. It can't be dictated as having one meaning or one interpretation.
Gosh, I love how you're describing it. It's like truth liberated, you know? Oh, God.
Yeah, I love that. Truth liberated. Yeah. Truth must come into the world in type and symbol, meaning archetype and symbol, for the world will not receive truth in any other way. We reject each other's words, but symbols and mythos and archetypes, they grab us. They get our attention, and we kind of go, wait a minute. okay, what's going on here? Because it can't be limited or, defined in one way.
Thus maybe has to be experienced to try to understand, right? You have to get into it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's about how we experience it. And the other one thing I'll say is that we are desperately in need of the mythic and the archetypal and the symbolic right now in our world. There are some great books out there by various people and great podcasts talking about how we are starved for the right brain creative mythic right now. We are overburdened with left brain arguing about what's literal and what's right and what's wrong. And we are desperately starving for myth and entering the mythic and entering our right brain and entering the non-literal so that we can enter into a spiritual or a mystical experience with ourselves and with the world and access it in a different way instead of being so limited by one interpretation that we're all arguing over,
Yeah. God, it just makes me think about like when, why would we want to do that? It's like a loss of wonder, a loss of awe, a loss of peace even. You can't access peace in the left brain because it's constantly trying to future-proof you or full of anxieties and stressors and calculations. It's not a place you hang out to rest and to feel at peace.
Yeah, you are so right. Because myth and archetype and symbol are bigger. It's a bigger paradigm. It's a bigger cosmos. You're entering something bigger than you and your opinion and what you think and whatever you just articulated in words. It's bigger. And it forces us to let go and surrender and enter something bigger with that wonder and vulnerability and openness to learn things that we haven't learned before.
Yeah, I was recently talking to a friend of mine, and actually, Callie, who was on the previous podcast, she was telling me, aside from that podcast, how like a lot of the big problems in life can't be solved with the left brain, but our left brain thinks so. Right? But it's actually like when we let that part relax and we ease into the right brain, that then suddenly that's where you get creative problem solving and insights that you never would have seen.
Yeah. Yes. It's so important how the negative and the positive work, how critique and also belief or wonder work, because we need critique to see what's wrong, but that won't solve. We don't solve problems by just citing what's wrong. We have to find something that's right, that's better, that's different, that's above that. And I love Einstein. I always paraphrase what he said, but he basically said a problem can't be solved at its own level. You have to go to a higher level to solve it. And entering into the mythic, bringing back the mythic and the archetypal and the symbolic, it takes us into that realm of mysticism and the transcendent that is beyond the literal. And that's where religion can take us and is supposed to take us. It doesn't always. Sometimes religion gets literalized into dogma. Yeah. But I would say the religious experience, which is beyond the literal. The religious experience is supposed to be beyond the literal and the mundane and the mortal. It's transcendence. And we are starved for that. We need it. We need it. And it's the aha moment, or it's that moment of a shattering when suddenly everything you thought you knew or you thought you were is suddenly shattered and you have this breakthrough. It's this aha moment. It's what this famous theologian Friedrich Schleiermacher called the natal hour of everything living in religion. Meaning, this is how religion starts. It starts with a mystic experience, a vision that is transcendent, that shatters the known or the previous or the traditional. And it takes you into this larger realm beyond what you thought you knew. That's the natal hour of everything living in religion. That's preserved in myth and archetype and symbol. And that's what they're supposed to do for us. They're supposed to get our attention and awaken us from our usual daily routine. They're supposed to make us stop and go, wait a minute, there's something more here that I'm not seeing. And it holds something for me. There's something more here. And it's this awe. I love what Jung said at the end of his life when he started having conversations with his own soul, that he felt like he had neglected his whole life with all of his scientific and academic and professional pursuits. And at the end of his life, he was in these conversations with his soul, which he wrote down and recorded so we can read them. He says, "Are you my soul? Have I neglected you my whole life? Who are you? Can you show me the way? Show me who you are?" That's what symbol and myth and metaphor and archetype do for us. They are showing us that we are more than just this, evolved monkey walking around in a physical body. There's something more to us, and they're trying to awaken us to something more and something bigger that we can enter and explore another dimension of ourselves.
It reminds me of how Jung starts the Red Book, where he says, I'm going to relate to you the story of my life. And a lot of people would expect that to be the famous people that I've met and eaten with. But I'll tell you of the experiences that are more real than that. And he's referring to the experiences with his soul.
Yeah. Yeah. When he starts jumping off the cliff and diving into his own subconscious and into the collective unconscious, the whole Red Book is a chronicle of his journey in diving into his own subconscious and the collective unconscious. Yeah. He felt like that was more important. The last, I think it's 20 years of his life, he stopped doing his clinical work, and he just spent the last decade or two of his life cliff diving into his own subconscious.
So neat. Well, speaking of diving in, that's a beautiful metaphor for the myth that we're going to be talking about today, which it was so fun how you and I connected over this, because I've been telling you about this idea to do this podcast for probably at least a year, and sharing the idea, and to hear that you are a fellow soul who loves the Selkie myth as well and really resonates with it was so refreshing. So I'd love if you could share just a little bit about the historicity and maybe the growth of that myth, or the evolution of that myth, or just give us some more insights to help us understand where did this come from and why does this matter?
Yeah, the great Selkie of Schulte-Skerry, or the gray Selkie. It's unknown whether it's great or gray. I kind of like the gray Selkie title better, of Schulte-Skerry. It's this beautiful myth about a seal. A Selkie is a word for seal, and selk or selch, in older English, it's an English word meaning seal. And the Selkie myth, or Selkie myth, sometimes it's called, is a myth about a creature who can transform from a seal to a human, and then back from human to seal, kind of like the mermaid myth. The mermaid myth is related and is very parallel, actually. It's kind of one version of the Selkie myth. But the Selkie myth is pretty old. I mean, there are references clear way, 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 way back to the 300s, the 3rd century and 4th century.
So old, yeah.
It's really, really old. And Schulte-Skerry, the great Selkie of Schulte-Skerry is just one version. Schulte-Skerry is the northernmost rocky island off the north coast of Scotland. So it'd be the northernmost tip. So one version of the myth is Scottish, and it's from that area. Most of the origins of the myth seem to come from the Orkney Islands, and the islands in that area of the North Sea. So the Orkney Islands are north of Scotland, and they're in the middle of nowhere in the North Sea. And there are other islands up there that the myth relates to. But what's fascinating about that origin in the Orkney Islands, and Orkney is a reference to orca, or the whale, which is another version. It can be a whale creature. But those islands in the middle of the North Sea, they're in the middle of this incredibly treacherous sea. It's one of the most treacherous seas on planet Earth. And it's that area of water that's between Great Britain and then also the Scandinavian countries and then Iceland and Greenland. It's that area. And it's a highly traveled, it's probably one of the most well-traveled areas of the ocean. And yet it's one of the most treacherous because it has incredibly high tides. It's a very rough sea and very cold. And the high tides are so high that as recently as last year, the high tides from the North Sea came into England and flooded an area of England, wiping out over 2,000 homes and killing 2 people. I mean, that's how dangerous the North Sea is. There are songs, even Jethro Tull wrote a song about the North Sea. And so it's interesting to me that this myth, the Selkie myth, comes from these islands that are in the middle. They're out there in the middle of the North Sea. And so what's really interesting to me about this Selkie myth is that it originates from this part of the world and this particular sea that is so dangerous. And so these islands, the Faroe Islands and the Orkney Islands and the Shetland Islands, they are the ones that are out there in the middle between those continents. So I think there's a reason why it emerges from that place. I thought I'd mention a little bit about its evolution, just that, it shows up in different forms. It shows up in stories, but where it kind of shows up, where it first seems to have gotten written down, is in the form of a song, a folk ballad that people would sing. And basically, the first version that was written down that we know of was 1855. And there was a woman named Lady Snara Vo in Shetland. She was from the Shetland Islands, and she had shared 7 verses of this song with some people. And a man by the name of Thomas wrote it down in 1855, and he was struck by not only the words, but the beautiful melody. And then it was reprinted later in 1886 in this collection by a guy by the last name of Child. And in that collection, again, it's this one version that is most common, the one that most people know, is this song that emerged, that got written down, even though the Selkie myth itself takes many different forms. And we can talk about some of those in a little bit. But the song version, the folk song version that emerged, seems to be the oldest recorded version that we know of. It has a particular story to it. And in that particular version of the Great Selkie or the Gray Selkie, it's a seal who turns into a man on the land instead of a woman. So instead of a mermaid, he's a seal in the ocean and he's a man on the land. And it's a tragic story. It's a sad story. And yet it's very beautiful and very haunting. And when the first man who wrote it down and first heard it, those first versions, he said it was clear to him that this had preserved a very ancient story and a very ancient melody. And one last thing I'll say about that is that not only is the Selkie a shapeshifter, a creature that can shift from animal to human, but it's a creature who is seen as having magical powers who can survive in that dangerous sea. And so I think that's one reason why the Selkie myth emerges from, those Orkney and Shetland and Faroe Islands, because it's a creature who is powerful enough to be able to shift from human to animal to fish when needed, and to be able to survive that incredibly stormy, dangerous sea.
Wow. Which sounds like, in some ways, such a great symbol, a model of life and how rough it can be, right? Especially under those circumstances. And just mentioning too, we do have that version of the myth in this month's study guide, so please check the show notes and you can see it. Also, though, if you would like to read it to us, I'm sure people would love to hear it.
Yeah, I thought I would read it in just a minute. I thought I would share a couple of other things about possible interpretations of the myth, because I think even though there are different versions, and what's important about the different versions is that the way that myth works and religion and archetype and stories is they're locational. They are unique to their location. So you can have a myth or a story like the Great Flood myth in the Bible, and yet you find it in different areas of the world, slightly different version, because each myth, even though there are similar themes that cross cultures, they get shaped and they're applied to and given voice by people in a particular location. And so scholars who study myth, like I studied myth at Harvard, and this was a really big point to point out that you can't just equate myths from different areas of the world or different cultures. You have to honor and respect the different myths in each location and culture, because it's expressing something about that culture that is unique to that culture and location and time. And even though they have parallels, we need to learn and recognize and study the unique things that each version of a myth or a mythic story is telling us about that location and that culture, what they were experiencing, why it was meaningful to them, and how they gave shape to it, and why it had power for them. And so, having said that, and acknowledging the different versions and how much you and I both love the different versions of the Selkie myth, because each one, whether it's a song or a movie or a story, each one is so beautiful and each one is so different and unique. At the same time, there are a few common themes, larger themes that I can pull out that I like to talk about, which simply are that when you're looking at a creature that can shift, that can morph from animal to human, there's an evolutionary message there to us. Our subconscious, I think our collective human subconscious, is reminding us that we are animal and we evolved. And we came from the sea. As human beings, we originally came from the sea, and crawled to the land and became, these upright creatures. And so I like the fact that the Selkie myth is drawing us back to some of our earliest evolutionary biology,
Mm-hmm.
and also the idea of a chimera. A chimera is a multifaceted, a creature that is composed of two completely different opposite things. And so a chimera or a chimeric figure is one who is magical because they are a composite of two different things. A chimera is also something that is impossible. It shouldn't and can't exist, and yet somehow it does. And so I like that notion of the chimera also. Mm-hmm. And the Selkie is also, I think, a symbol of not only change and our ability to transmute and transform as creatures, but also our dual nature as both animal and kind of spiritual beings or transcendent beings. We struggle with that ourselves, with our animal nature, and then our higher mind, our transcendent self, and we struggle with those things, and the Selkie embodies that tension, And the Selkie also, I think, a being who can be a fish in the sea and a human on the land, is someone who can deal with risk and change and danger. They're almost like a protector, and not only a magical figure, but a protector who can morph and change as needed, who has that ability. And I think there's a message there that we are more able to morph and change and adapt. That is our evolutionary nature, more so than we realize a lot of the time, So, and I think it's a figure or a being that is trying to communicate with us about our own nature and our own abilities,
Yeah, I would love if you could touch on just some of the mythic or symbolic meaning of the water even, because as you're talking about this dual nature and being able to go in, it seems like that is a huge aspect with the Selkie as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Because as an animal or a man or a woman upon the land, we're on solid ground, right? The water always represents diving into the subconscious or the spirit or the soul or the psyche. The water is the non-material, hard ground, material, physical self. Water is an amazing substance itself. And so the water represents, and the sea and the ocean represents diving into, again, that unconscious self and the collective unconscious that's so much bigger than who we think we are as this finite human being walking on the land. And it's unpredictable. We don't know what we're going to find. When you start diving into the subconscious or the psyche or the soul, it's wondrous, and it's filled with all kinds of creatures, including scary creatures and danger and facing the shadow and facing things that we didn't know were there. And so, yeah, I think the water holds a lot of symbolism. Also, water is so healing. It's the universal solvent, and it can transmute anything. And it's so healing. There's nothing like going to a hot spring or a pool. There's something just so innate in us that makes us want to get in water and just be there, and relaxes and heals us too.
So many good themes. Goodness. Well, I love how that image of the Selkie is also this like ability to go between worlds and like not be just stuck in one or limited by one, but being able to go in between is a very potent image as well, especially with the symbolism you were just sharing too.
Yeah, a hermetic, alchemical figure, the paradoxical creature who can inhabit different realms and cross between realms. Oh yeah, exactly. That's always in every myth, that's a really important figure, from the Hermes figure to the Jesus, the Christ figure. To, Neo in the Matrix. Any being who can cross between realities and realms and paradigms, and knows how to operate in completely different realms, whereas most people are living in one maybe, and this person can cross and inhabit different realms, different aspects of reality. That's a powerful figure.
Yeah, it seems like there's this struggle in modern life right now to like just even a feeling of drowning in emotions, drowning in overwhelm, that feels like this myth has some great insights into some of these aspects. But before we go into that, is there any other historical aspects or things that you think would help add some depth to our understanding of the Selkie myth?
I think just that once it was written down, in 1855, and then it began circulating, and that's when it began. Well, it was circulating before that, but that's when it began to take on different written, produced forms, and so we have all these different versions. And so we have the song, the well-known ballad, which is the version I was familiar with and loved to sing, and then we have the version that you found in the Pinkola Estes version. The ballad version is, again, it's about a seal who becomes a man, and it's a tragic, sad story. The Pinkola Estes version is this feminist version that she came across, where the seal is a female figure, becomes a woman on the land. And it's a completely different story. She loses her skin, and then finally, and she suffers because her skin has been taken, but then finally her son finds her skin and she's able to return to the ocean. That story, that version is so powerful. In the ballad, the one that's the most well-known in terms of the song version, the ballad version, and I'll read the words to it in a minute, but in that version, it's a man who is the father of the Selkie, and he's a Selkie in the ocean, and on the land he's male, and he fathers a child and comes and wants to take the child back. He's a shapeshifter, and he's kind of ugly as a man, and he comes and impregnates a human woman, but then he wants his baby. He wants to come and get his child and pay the woman who mothers his baby, births his baby. And she doesn't really want to, but he talks her into it, and he takes his baby to the ocean, and then he foretells that they both will die, and they do. And so it's this lament, it's this tragedy. And what I want to say about that, and kind of the history of the ballad, the song, the Selkie of Shalsbury, it's a British Isles, Scotland, and there are so many folk songs of Britain, Great Britain, Scotland, Ireland, England, that are really sad, lamenting songs. And I used to study those songs. I used to sing a lot of those folk songs. And I love the poetry and the lament and the sadness in those ballads that are tragedies. They're a lament about the difficulties and the hardship and the loss and the grief and the death and the thwarted, life that appears in these songs. Because the songs that are laments, these folk songs that talk about the tragedies of life, they're beautiful. They have the most haunting melodies and the most haunting poetry in all of these songs. There are so many. And when you hear them, they just kind of gut you with the sadness and the tragedy that they're writing about. But at the same time, the music and the poetry and the haunting melody have this ability to transmute the tragedy and turn it into something comforting, something that somehow brings comfort. And so I think that's one reason why there are so many folk songs from the British Isles that are laments about loss and tragedy, because music and ballad and poetry, and particularly a very haunting melody, was the one way that people had to be able to somehow transmute or find comfort in these tragedies. So they would take the tragedies in their lives and they would turn them into songs. They would turn them into a ballad, a very sad ballad, because that was one way that they could somehow find comfort in that tragedy, to turn it into a very sad, sad song, And so I think that's a really important historical aspect of this, the ballad of the great Selkie, which is the tragic version of the story, because it was, somehow something similar to that happened in history, and people turned it into this beautiful ballad and turned it into a myth so that they could cope with it and process it and try to heal from it. And that's another really important function of myth and story. So,
I love what you're sharing. It makes me excited to hear you share that version, because I was just thinking there's even like relative themes to even the Christ story, or even the Greco-Roman myths that have that kind of a sun god who dies, or even the Egyptian myth of Osiris and Isis. And so it's made me think. I did not even make those connections until you're saying that about the tragic version of the Selkie myth. It's got those elements in it. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it serves a higher purpose. And I noticed that back in the 70s and 80s, when I was learning folk songs and playing my guitar and singing folk songs from Great Britain, I noticed how many were tragic laments, and yet they were so beautiful. They can be telling a horrific story. Really, there are some horrific stories in folk ballads, and they're so haunting and beautiful. They just, break your heart, but there's something spiritual and healing and beautiful about them. And so that's what first attracted me to the Selkie ballad, the song and the myth, because it was so tragic and awful, and it was so haunting. It just grabbed me, and I just couldn't stop singing it and playing it. And there are other such ballads that are favorites of mine. But yeah, I can read the words to it right now if you'd like.
Beautiful. Yeah, would love that. I was just thinking as you were sharing too, it's like a breaks your heart in a way that's almost like a breaks it open, which is beautiful. So anyways, yeah, I'm so excited to hear you share.
Yeah. It's that shattering that, Jesus talks about in the Bible, a broken heart and a contrite spirit. It shatters you, but humbles you. It makes a new creature of you. It transmutes you into this incredibly compassionate, empathetic person who feels heartache in a way you didn't feel it before. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, God. I love this. Thank you so much, Maxine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the positive side of tragedy, and particularly music, what music can do for us, that it soothes our souls. The ballad version, the song version, which is different than some of the story versions and the film versions, which we can talk about in a minute. This ballad version maintains a kind of a Gaelic poetry. There's a Scottish Gaelic kind of aspect to the poetry that I love. So here it goes. I'll read it to you. And some of the words may not make sense because they're kind of still in a kind of a Gaelic Scottish form. An earthly Norris sits and sings, and aye she sings by lily ween. Little ken my baron's father, far less the land that he stops in. Then ane arose at her bed fit, and a grumly guest, I'm sure was he, saying, Here am I, thy baron's father, although I be not comely. I am a man upon the land, I am a Selkie in the sea, and when I'm far frae every land, my home is in Shulscary. And here's what the nurse says in response. It was nae wee, quoth the maiden fair. It was nae weel, indeed, quoth she, for the great Selkie of Shulscary should it come and ought a bairn to me? Then he has taken a purse of gold, and he has pat it on her knee, saying, Give to me, my little young son, and take thee up thy Norris fee. And it shall come to pass on a summer's day, when the sun shines het on every stain, I shall take my little young son, and teach him for to swim the Fam. And thou shalt marry a proud gunner, and a right good gunner I'm sure he'll be, and the very first shot that e'er he shoots, he'll kill both my young son and me. Oh, he'll kill both my young son and me.
There's something like even just healing hearing it, right? It's so potent. I wonder if you could share, since there are some Gaelic words and it's a little tricky, if you could share a little synopsis for everybody too of just what's behind the story.
Right. So this seal man comes out of the ocean and shows up at this woman's bed, the foot of her bed in the middle of the night. And he says to her, I mean, she's sitting and singing. She's singing a song to her little child, but she doesn't know who the father is. So it's a child without an apparent father. And he shows up in the middle of the night this one night and says, I'm the child's father. And he's kind of ugly, And she says, no, it's not you. It can't be you. And he says, yeah, it's me. And here's a purse of gold. I'll pay you for your nurse's fee for mothering my child, but I want to take my child with me. She thinks about it. She kind of resists, but then she accepts because she's poor and she's alone and has no husband. And so she takes the purse of gold, and he predicts what will happen. And so the idea is that eventually in the future, after the song, the song only takes us as far as his prediction, but his prediction is that he takes his child back to the ocean so he can teach it to swim in the foam. But she will eventually marry a gunner, and he will be out shooting one day and not realize who these seals are, and he will shoot both the Selkie and the little seal, not realizing that it's the child of the woman he's married to.
So haunting. So tragic. Yeah.
We talk about several cases of mistaken identity, Oh
my gosh, yeah. And kind of a hot mess of a situation.
Hot mess of mistaken identity, which can happen, And paternity, not knowing who the father of her child is. And then this man, there's this very old theme of a father wanting to ensure that he's the parent, of a child, and wanting to know that he has the paternity. I mean, that's a very old kind of theme of a father wondering or competing with another man about who's really the parent of this child, and a woman being the only one who knows, and sometimes she doesn't know, and then a future husband comes along and destroys the previous husband,
Yeah.
and child.
Yeah.
Those are human themes.
Yeah. Goodness. Well, I love even you. So we've got this masculine version of the myth, which has so many fascinating themes. We've got the feminine version of the myth, which we've been talking about. And if you've missed that, please go back and listen to prior episodes. And then also you had mentioned a third kind of way of looking at the myth, or a third version.
Yeah. There are a couple of films, and I love that there are these different versions. I love this male version because it really does speak a male perspective at the male struggle as a father and provider. It really speaks a male perspective.
Yeah.
But the Pinkola Estes version that you discuss in your previous episode, that I hope listeners will go back and hear, is such an archetypal female journey of, losing your skin, and because the man is kind of controlling you, and then it's your child who saves your skin and brings it back.
Yeah.
I love that female version. And then there are these other versions. So I'll mention two films really quick that are totally different versions. There's the film The Little Mermaid. That's actually another version of the Selkie myth in a way. And that's interesting because what it shows, what it brings forth in that myth, and also in another film called Ondine, is that there's a dark, evil power that's somehow involved in all this behind the scenes. And so that's like another third version that brings in this third dimension that we see in other versions of the myth, that it's more than just the power of the creature themselves who can transmute and have these different lives on land and on sea, but there's a dark power somewhere hidden that is trying to destroy the creature, the powerful magical creature, the Selkie, the mermaid. And you see that in both the film The Little Mermaid and then in the Ondine film Ondine with Colin Farrell, a film I highly recommend. And so there's a dark, evil power that is trying to destroy the Selkie in both of those stories. And so she has to find her power, and she finds her power through the help of a male partner in both stories. But he's not a savior. She's the powerful, magical creature who can really transmute, between animal and human and fish. But she has to find her power and outsmart and outwit and survive the dark power that's trying to destroy her. So you see that in both The Little Mermaid and the film Ondine. And in the film Ondine, the Selkie is out there swimming in the sea and is found by a fisherman, Colin Farrell. And yet what I love about the film Ondine is that I don't want to give too much away because I want everybody to watch it. But what I love about it is that it does a beautiful job of addressing how we live in this very concrete, finite, literal world that takes all of our attention. And we think that's all there is. And then there's this weird coincidence, strange thing that comes out of nowhere that makes us question our normal reality. And the film all the way through is taking the viewer back and forth between, is this woman a Selkie? Is she a magical creature, or is she just a normal woman? And all the way through the film, it kind of takes you through that. And then one more film I really want to mention is The Secret of Rowan and Nish, which puts the Selkie myth in Ireland. It's an Irish version. It's a beautiful film. Another film I would recommend all your viewers to watch and to see. And it's a complex story. I don't want to give too much of it away, but The Secret of Rowan and Nish really takes a whole different approach to the myth. And it's much more complex. It's a bigger story, but it's about a family who has this kind of hidden tradition that they don't know about, that one of their ancestors was actually a Selkie, and that genetic inheritance is still there, but it only shows up once in a while in one dark-haired, dark-eyed member of the family. And so finally it's this one family member who they kind of discover and think that they must have inherited that, because they are the ones who actually discover the Selkie heritage and genetic tendency in the family. And it's a really cool movie. And I won't say more than that. But yeah, and so I think these different versions, they pull out different aspects of the story that are there for us to learn from and learn about ourselves. And I love the beauty of the different versions that pop up in different locations. I love the film versions. I love the ballad. I love the Pinkola Estes story in her book. They all hold so much for us, I think.
Goodness. Well, speaking of how much they hold, I would This has all been so delicious already. I'm wondering if we could maybe get a little bit of just even your own encounter with this myth in your life, and maybe to prelude that with any thoughts you might have about archetypes and showing up in our life as well before we go into your journey or whatever feels more natural.
Sure. Well, again, the power of myth and archetype and symbol is that it holds information about us that we don't even know. It holds surprises for us. And I think it's really important I love Jung, Carl Jung, and I think it's really important to look for the archetypes that show up in our lives, because archetypal patterns show up, and they show up repeatedly. Whenever there's a pattern in your life that is mythic or symbolic or archetypal, and it just keeps coming back, it holds a message for you. And I've noticed these things since I was little, and it's a big part of my life. I really pay attention to synchronicities and archetypes and patterns and how they show up, because I'll be having some experience, and then I'll suddenly notice, wait, this is an exact match to like the Mary Magdalene story, or I'll think, oh wait, this is what I'm experiencing is an exact match to the Sophia myth and Gnostic texts or whatever. And so I've just noticed that over and over again in my life. And I have friends who comment on it, that these archetypal patterns show up in my life, And so that's been a huge influence in my life. And what I'll say about that is just that for me, it's been my guiding star. It's been my spiritual path, because it shows me why I'm here. That is how I've known who I am beyond just this working class kid born in Shelley, Idaho, trying to find her way, It shows me who I am in the world as a soul, as a being, as a psyche, as more than just my body. And it has shown me my path. It has led the way. And it has shown me what I'm here to do, what I'm really here to do. I mean, yeah, we're here to work and have a house and pay our bills and find a car we like and find a boyfriend or a girlfriend that we like and maybe have a kid or two, We're here to do all these mortal human things that are beautiful, and that's our life. But we're also here, we have a gift in our soul. We're here to say something or share something. So I don't want to discount our human lives, which are so beautiful and heartbreaking and wrenching and amazing. That's our life unfolding, and we make the best of it, and we love it and we hate it. But there's something more inside of us that keeps speaking to us and keep nagging us and telling us there's something more to you. You're here for some reason, and you have something to say. And so we try to figure out what that is. We start singing or making art, or we go to school, or we do whatever to try to figure it out. What is this thing inside of us that's trying to get out? And all I'll say is that for me, it's been noticing the archetypes that show up and the synchronicities. Those are my signposts telling me this is why you're here. This is what you're here to do. And you're on the right path. It's like when you're, driving somewhere and you get lost, when you finally see that one sign that says, Las Vegas, 30 miles, oh, okay, we're on the right, wherever you're going, the road signs are telling you how far you are. And the road signs tell you, like, sometimes I would be driving up to Idaho and I would miss the turnoff and wound up on 84 heading to Oregon. And I'd be, no way. I mean, I've done that. We've probably all missed turnoffs. I remember one time I was coming home from college with a friend. We missed the turnoff for the Umatilla toll bridge, and we drove almost all the way to Portland, and we were trying to go to Yakima Valley. It was hilarious. The signs are telling us if we're on the right road or not, and they're there. I experience those road signs all around me in life, but they show up as archetypes and archetypal patterns and synchronicities. So
I love that. One of the most inspiring aspects I've seen as you're describing that, even, and I'm just thinking back to the parts of your life that you've shared with me in the past, of just like, I can see that in your life. I can see how many times you've had to make choices which were even against the grain, and we're making those choices, I'm sure, from a space of this is what's right for me, and I don't understand it, and it doesn't make sense right now, but this is what's right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, basically, I'm a feminist historian and a feminist theologian. And that's not been an easy path in Christianity and Mormon culture. It's been a hard path. And there are times when you're feeling called and inspired to do something and everybody's terrified, including fellow scholars or feminists, you know. There have been times when I've terrified everybody because I was seeing something and trying to bring forth something that other people were not ready for yet, that they were afraid of. And particularly in feminist theology, it's so important because we've been so patriarchal in Western culture and religion and Christianity for so long that, and again, that's an imbalance. It's a brain imbalance. It's a left brain dominant, masculine dominant thing. And to really find balance, you know, in our psyche and our culture and our cultural psyche, we have to do that shadow work to bring back the part that's repressed and denied and marginalized. And so my life's work has been exploring the other, you know, the repressed, the marginalized, the feared, which includes a lot of the feminine and the feminist and the female archetypes in religion. So I spent years studying the Christian year and its holy days, and I discovered that what the Christian world is celebrating is half the Christian year, from Advent to Pentecost, from December to June, the story of Jesus and his story. And there are some feminists who work on the female holy days here and there, but nobody had discovered that there's another half of the year known as ordinary time, which is where the story of the divine feminine unfolds. And it's utterly parallel to the story of Jesus. It's the Marian half of the year. So I spent 15 years, you know, documenting that, discovering it, developing song and ritual and services for all those holy days. And I haven't published all of that yet. I need to. But that's just one example, you know. And most of the time in my work, I've had other people in religion and even in scholarship look at me like, what are you talking about? Because they don't get it until I bring it out and write it or publish it, and then they go, oh, now we see what you were talking about. Honestly, that has happened to me consistently every year of my life. And so when you do delve into the archetypal and the mythic, and when you see things there that speak to you, and they don't speak to anybody else, but you feel compelled to bring those forward, other people may scratch their head and it may not mean anything to them. That doesn't matter. You know, you've got to bring it forth. I love the text, I'm pretty sure it's in Thomas, the Gnostic text that says, you know, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you don't bring forth what is within you, what you don't bring forth will kill you. And I really believe that. And so, yeah, and so myth and archetype and symbol have been my best friends, my guides, my comfort. They validate me when other people don't. And they keep me going and help me know that I'm on the right path until other people can see what I was trying to do. And then they do. People see it and go, oh, wow, that's amazing. I never saw that before. And I think, yeah, I know you didn't see it and you were giving me a hard time, but I'm glad you see it now. But, you know, there are times when, as a creator, as an artist, as a writer, as a feminist, as a woman, other people are never going to see sometimes what you see. And my message is, for all listeners out there, believe in yourself, trust yourself. Trust what is unfolding within you from your own soul, your own connection to that ocean, that collective unconscious, your synchronicities, your guides, your archetypal patterns that possess your life. Trust what is unfolding within you. Trust yourself. Honor yourself. Other people may get it later on and they may never get it. But trust yourself because you're here to bring forth, you know, what is unique to you. You're a unique human being. And even if you don't believe in a soul or a transcendent self or any of that, you are a totally unique genetic creature. There's only one of you. So you're the only person who can bring forth the perspective of life that you experience as a human being. You are so unique. So if you don't express what you see, what you uniquely is that one and only creature with your particular genetic composition, if you don't bring that forward, the world will never see it. They'll never have it. You have to bring forth what only you can bring forth. And so, yeah, but let it unfold, trust, honor yourself.
I feel like this is just specifically for me, and I know it's going to hit everybody because it's definitely what I needed to hear. I think there's such a tendency to want to look, you feel or see something cool and then look for validation to make it seem like it's going to be a worthy path to pursue. And that's, I mean, I it's just hitting me so strongly with your lived experience, your story, your life path. Like, it is, if you waited for that, you would never have created anything because
Exactly.
you saw things no one was seeing.
Exactly. If I hadn't believed in myself and in my vision and my spiritual inspiration, I wouldn't have accomplished anything. I wouldn't have published a book on feminist theology, recovering the divine feminine and female priesthood in Mormon culture and history and theology. I would never have spent 15 years at Holy Cross Chapel recovering the divine feminine side of the Christian year. I would never have gotten a Harvard fellowship. I would not be who I am, because every step of the way on those projects, other people criticized me and invalidated me and didn't believe in me. I mean, and so it's made me strong. It's made me really trust myself. And, yeah, I really trust myself. And now whenever somebody tries to invalidate me or criticize me, I get in their face, and I'm really proud of the fact that I can wield the sword, the warrior in me will defend myself and my soul. And that's archetypal. I used to love serving at Holy Cross Chapel in Salt Lake and looking at the beautiful stained glass windows. Each window held the most beautiful archetypal figure for me and for my journey. And I used to love looking at the window showing the woman in Revelation 12, the book of Revelation, the woman who comes forth out of the wilderness. And then there's an Archangel Michael window directly across from her, and he's the warrior who protects her. In Revelation 12, that story of the woman who comes forth out of the wilderness, she flees into the wilderness for safety, and the dragon is trying to destroy her, and then Archangel Michael protects her and slays the dragon, and then she comes back out of the wilderness when it's time. Well, those are archetypal symbols, and they represent parts of yourself. And they show up in the Selkie myth, and they're parts of yourself. And so you are the woman who needs to flee into the wilderness sometimes for safety and for healing. And you are the Archangel Michael bearing the sword who will protect her and help her to come forth again to fulfill her destiny. And so these archetypes, I mean, I was amazed by how the windows in that chapel, I spent 13 years in that chapel, and that journey that I made, the spiritual journey, the windows all depicted specific aspects of my journey. It was amazing. And the paintings. And it was a Marian chapel. It was created by the Sisters of the Holy Cross, which is a Marian order. And instead of being focused on the journey of Jesus, the stained glass windows in the apse of the sanctuary depicted the journey of Mary. And that's what I was uncovering during those 13 years, was her journey and her side of the Christian year, which nobody had really uncovered that before. And so those stained glass windows were there at synchronicities and signposts for me that I was on the right path, because I kept noticing, oh my gosh, these windows are depicting the three windows of the apse up in the top of the chapel depicted the journey of Mary. They depicted her Annunciation and the three Marys at the cross, and then her assumption into heaven, which is right now. We are right now, August 15th, is the assumption of Mary into heaven. The assumption of the divine feminine, who is the parallel of Jesus, who ascends into heaven at, 40 days after Easter. Well, in August, mid-August, and between August 15th and 22nd, we have the assumption and then the coronation of Mary, of her parallel assumption into heaven. So that's where we are right now in this week. So it's the perfect time to talk about the divine feminine. But I think that women in this world have a huge task of recovering and bringing into consciousness and conversation and equality the sacred feminine, the female body, the feminine experience, the lived experience, the what we experience, and also the transcendent feminine that men and women both experience and feel within themselves. It's about both the female body and her experience in this hard world, and also the feminine, the sacred feminine. And I think we have a big task in bringing that forward, so that not to replace the masculine, which is what men fear the minute we start talking about the sacred feminine. What? You're going to replace the masculine? No, we're talking about balance, a partnership, equality. So I think that as human beings, we have a huge task to discover our inner self. And I think as women, we have a huge task to bring forth the feminine and the female into a balanced and an integral, dynamic partnership.
I love that vision, and I'm wondering if you might just if any helpful details or parts of the story that you'd like to share. But it feels like one of the areas also where you kind of received a lot of persecution or misunderstanding was in trying to reclaim a divine feminine. Am I understanding that right?
Oh, yeah. When I was first pursuing the female equality and authority as an LDS missionary in Florida in 1978, I got so much criticism. When I just wanted to serve a mission, women weren't supposed to go in the 1970s. I got so much criticism for that. So I had to fight off all that, go on a mission. Then I had to fight off the criticisms that, you're not equal to the elders. You're not this, you're not that. And I had to just go ahead and trust and do what I felt, And then, like, women were not supposed to serve as witnesses at a baptism or give blessings. Well, I did both as a missionary. I thought, I can do that. And that was pretty heretical. I got in trouble for it. I didn't care. I come back and I start researching Mormon history, and I find all this amazing stuff in LDS Origins about women in priesthood, that women had priesthood and the divine feminine was there. So I start bringing all this stuff back out of these documents I'm reading. And some of my male scholarly friends and female feminist friends really doubted what I was doing, and, kind of criticized it and told me, you're seeing things that we don't see there. You're seeing more feminism there than we see there. And I still hear that today. I hear that every day from people who say, you're seeing more feminism there in LDS Origins than what's really there. Well, no, I'm not. There's way more there than what we've been seeing. It's there. So when I pulled a whole bunch of it out and put it in a book and published it in 1992, a lot of my friends, feminist and scholarly friends, came to me and apologized and said, now we see what you were talking about. This is amazing. And my publisher, he was reading all these feminist excerpts I'd found and pulled out. He was blown away, and he kept calling me and saying, I can't believe this. I'm like, I can't believe this stuff is there in Mormon history, And then, but the church got mad at me because it was kind of too much feminism all at once. They weren't ready for it, to discover that women had priesthood and the divine feminine, the mother goddess, was there. So I got excommunicated from the Mormon church for publishing that book, And then a lot of people feared me and thought I was leading people astray. And later, then I got involved in Gnostic Christianity and was deeply involved in that and loved it, found healing there. And then I started discovering the divine feminine in the Christian year, and some of the other Gnostics the men were looking at me like, what are you talking about? You're putting too much emphasis on the feminine. But I had a female bishop. I had both a male bishop and a female bishop in Gnostic tradition. I loved them both. Amazing human beings. Both wonderful to me every step of the way. And she kept saying, no, I've noticed the same thing. And I would compare notes with her. Like, I would wear a particular dark cross for half of the year and a light cross for the other half of the year, which seemed to correspond to the winter half versus the summer half, and things like that. And I saw the female pattern in the Christian year. And I would compare notes with her, and I would say, have you noticed this? And she'd say, yes, I have. And she said, I do the same thing. She said, I wear two different crosses. I wear one cross for one half of the year and one cross for the other half of the year. I didn't even know if she did that. It was really wonderful to encounter signposts and along the way, and that one rare person who got what I was doing. But I really had to trust myself, and not to say that we should all just go off on our own tangent and disregard what other people say. I didn't. I listened to people. I doubted myself at times, and I I was very careful, and I checked and double checked and tested and reviewed and went back and reviewed, because, you don't want to go off and be some crazy person off on some weird tangent. You want to test everything that you find and experience. And I do. I test it, I evaluate it, and I reevaluate it. So I had to really trust what was unfolding, what I was seeing, because as long as the signs are there, the confirmations are there, the evidence is there, and it comes in from a scholarly perspective, which I am. I'm a historian and a theologian and a women's studies scholar. As long as I gather enough evidence to convince me that something is solid, I move ahead. I'm like, nah, this is an accurate diagnosis. It's good enough, and it's better than a lot of other diagnoses floating out there that people are living by and repeating, who haven't gone and done the deeper work that I've done. I've come up with some really good new diagnoses and theories that I think are rock solid and better than a lot of the conclusions people have made before that everybody's holding on to, that really are not that great. So yeah, it's a balance. You have to trust yourself and not let other people talk you out of something that you know to be right. But at the same time, we do need to listen and evaluate things. So it's a balance.
Which feels like such a mirror of the Selkie creature, is being able to balance both worlds, right? And
yeah,
go between the worlds.
I love that. I love that you said that.
Yeah.
I love the Selkie who unites the opposite. The Selkie is the symbol of paradox. And I always say the answer to every conflict and every dilemma is paradox. Because it's only when you gather the truth on both sides into this weird composite new creature that people aren't seeing because they're all devoted to one side or they're all devoted to the other side, It's that creature who can facilitate paradox and embody paradox, who can truly gather what's solid and real and true on both sides of the conflict, because there's always truth on both sides. And you don't adhere to all the flawed bad parts. You gather the true parts into this composite paradox, and that's what you hold on to. And this Selkie is this paradoxical figure who synthesizes opposites, and that's the enlightened message, I think, in every spiritual tradition and every myth and every archetype. There's this enlightened message of reconciling opposites, because that's who we are as creatures of evolutionary, physical, human creatures, and creatures with a higher mind, a transcendent mind. We're trying to reconcile opposites. And so a symbol like the Selkie is a beautiful, powerful symbol teaching us how to reconcile those opposites and find balance in the tension, the tension of opposites, and the fact that both are teaching us,
I love that. And even then thinking about how to care well for both aspects of ourselves, right? Not giving too much attention to the physical and not at the sacrifice of the soul, as well as not too much attention to the soul at the sacrifice of the physical.
Yeah. That is so beautiful and powerful. I'm so glad you said that, because, I do dwell more in the mythic and transcendent and intellectual, the realm of the mind, and I neglect my body way too much. I've never been balanced, except for very rare periods of my life. And I really struggle to give my body and the material the time and devotion it deserves, because I live in the realm of the mind, And the Selkie myth and those ballads really bring me into my body and my feelings, and they're so healing for me. So I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah. Well, you've been such an inspiration to me, I think, from, even into years of our friendship and getting to know each other. I feel like from day one, you've always been such a proponent of speaking to balance and sharing your own experiences of some imbalances and what you've learned, which was, honestly, it's always been a message I've needed to hear as well, because I tend to get very passionate and excited about certain things that I'm doing, and I want to just
neglect everything else and just go there. You know, it's like the mystic versus the mundane even.
Yeah.
And even judging my life or my body as mundane and avoiding those things and wanting to stay in my head.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I have so much admiration for you, your creativity and your vision and your talents and your ability to manage so many things. But yeah, I mean, I'm that same way. I want to live in film and myth and writing and intellectual pursuits and the mind, the life of the mind. And I really, really neglect the life of my body to an extreme degree. And yet, yeah, there's a great scene in Harry Potter that I love where he's going to the mirror, he's going and talking to the mirror up, it's up in this higher aspect of the school. And he loves to go and consult with that mirror because the mirror shows him these other dimensions and answers and other things. And he is advised, you can't just always live in the ideal and in the transcendent. You've got to live in the body, and that's where it all happens. You've got to make it all happen in the real world. You can't just live in the transcendent magic world. And I remember that scene. It really spoke to me because I'd rather live in the magic world all the time. It's way more fun than the material.
Same. I think that hit me with the Selkie myth as well, is just this feeling of like loss and grief when she's on land, or even the male version. It's like there's a part of me that just does not want to celebrate that they're on land. It's like, no, go back to the sea. It's way cooler there. Like, don't waste your time up here. But then, like, honestly, I feel like I even remember just going on a really crappy bus ride in New York City years ago and feeling like, gosh, this is such a dumpy experience. And then out my window, I was seeing in these insane populated, massively populated areas, or there's just skyscrapers of apartment buildings. I would see out on some of the terraces potted plants and like little signs of life, where I was thinking, like, the words that came to me as I was feeling into like seeing this is, those are patches of heaven. Like, no matter where we are as humans, no matter how bad life can be, there's signs of little patches of heaven that we try to create. And I think that has been such a deep archetype or like piece for me of just, how do we bring more of the magic into the mundane? How do we bring more of the heaven into earth? Because I feel like my own tendency to get out of the earth part and just stay in the mystical part makes it so I actually miss the magic of the earth part. And I've found that, like, even just in my career aspect, where I've spent so much time with people who make tons and tons and tons of money and who have like talked to me about, you've got to outsource all of the mundane stuff. Like, you got to save your energy for the stuff that you and only you can do. So you've got the house cleaner, and you've got the dishwasher, the person who does your laundry, the person who does your yard. And what I've found over the years is I did believe that for a while, is I became really disconnected from my soul. It wasn't therapeutic. It wasn't healing. And so then as I've found more balance and I've actually, live the meditation of washing dishes sometimes, or like live the meditation of vacuuming the floor, like I am a more whole person. And that heaven on earth experience becomes less something I'm reaching for and more something that I'm awakened to, that it is like, that life is overall pretty peaceful in this Western part of the world, at least. And for a lot of us, like, it's not, there is so much beauty, and no matter where we are in the world, there's always something beautiful to see, even in the darkest circumstances.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love everything you just said. And I love the way that you refocused your career on art and creating beauty and beautiful things, because your work just brings that beauty right out of nowhere into, like, whoa. I look at your website and I look at the stuff you're sharing, and I feel like I've just been wakened and out of a deep sleep, and you've just brought me into this amazing world that's right there that I was ignoring. And it's so important. And it's like gardening, when I started going out, I was living on my laptop inside all the time, never going outside. And then I started gardening. I started going out and decided I had to transform this whole weed patch around my condo into this beautiful flower garden. And I started doing that. It was like several years, like a 3 or 4 year project. I lost 35 pounds. I was more focused and more centered and aligned and integrated than I'd ever been, I think, since, I don't know, maybe since I was in high school when I used to do athletics all the time. And I just couldn't believe what it did for my soul. And I turned my yard into this beautiful place of all my favorite flowers, and beautiful. It's just, and that's the thing that we need. We are starved for that. We only see the negative and the harsh. There's something about human nature, our animal side, that just wants to fight in a fight for survival and sees everything as like a threat,
Mm-hmm.
a threat for survival, an existential threat. And so we just need to be fighting all the time and competing all the time. And, and like you were saying, like in your career too, and to just let go of all of that in the middle of all of it and grow a garden, or sit down and sew a beautiful outfit. I want to go get a sewing machine. I haven't sewed for like 40 years and I want to start sewing again, to just create beauty in the midst of, all this other stuff, condo stuff that needs to be done, and cleaning. I find cleaning to be very cleansing, and very centering for my body. And so, yeah, yes to everything that you said.
Oh, goodness, so I love what you added to. Gal, it feels like we're kind of drawing to the end of this beautiful conversation. I just wonder, in closing, like, is there anything you've wished we would have talked about that you'd like to talk about, or is there even just like a closing message or thought that you're hoping people walk away with after listening to this?
Gosh, I think you kind of gave it already, that we need to notice. We need to stop being focused on the negative all the time. We're drowning in the negative. We need to stop and focus on the beauty that is there. It is there. Like you said, it doesn't matter where. It doesn't matter how ugly or dark or whatever. When I decided to beautify my condo, this other condo that I had, it was over on the west side by Redwood Road, and it was surrounded by weeds, and it was a condo that had been abused. This was back in 2010. Nobody wanted it. People kept moving in and moving out, and they trashed it. And I found it, and I thought it was beautiful and amazing. And so I worked really hard and redid the floors and fixed it up nice and painted and transformed the yard all around it. And it became this incredibly beautiful place, a block from Redwood Road, And I wound up selling it 10 or 15 years later for 10 times what I bought it for, But notice, it's not even just noticing the beauty. I think we need to notice the beauty, but we need to realize that we can bring forth beauty in the midst of anywhere, and stop giving all power to your circumstances and to what other people say and to the negative. Just stop. Watch these movies, read the Selkie myth and the lyrics, enter into the mythic, into the magical creatures who have amazing power over their circumstances, who can transmute and transform, and realize that you have the power within you to change things, to change your circumstances, to change your environment, to improve things. You have the power to affect other human beings. You have the power to either just make somebody's day or ruin somebody's day with what you say. So that's the last message I want to leave, is that you do, do what Quinn does and create beauty. Create beauty. Bring forth the beautiful part of yourself. There's a beautiful part in each one of us, no matter how wrecked we feel. We all feel devastated by life. I've been wrecked so many times. I wanted to give up. I wanted to die so many times, Life wrecks all of us. Reach down. Use myth and archetype and symbol to reach into a deeper part of yourself. That's why it's there. That's what will help you to do it. And bring forth that beauty that's inside of you into that ugly, dark relationship or dark apartment or dark neighborhood or whatever, whatever bad circumstance you're in, and transmute it, transform it. You can affect it. You may not totally transform it. you will affect it. We affect each other every day with our energy, our love, our words, our negativity, our positive. And if you recognize that you have that power within you, that everything you say and do affects somebody, so why not let it be a beautiful effect? Why not bring forth something beautiful within yourself? Because you're going to feel a whole lot better, and you're going to make everybody else feel better, and your place is going to look better. And just recognize you have that power and stop giving power to everything and everybody around you and denying your power, because there's way too much of that. We are sinking into a black hole of negativity and disempowerment. We don't realize our power, or we don't realize our power to heal and bring forth beauty. And that's what we need to focus on. That's why we need myth and symbol and archetype and the Selkie story. The Selkie is that creature who can just transform as needed. They can be a fish swimming in the roughest, most dangerous sea on planet Earth, the North Sea, or they can walk upon the land and do these amazing things, you know?
What a beautiful completion. Thank you so much, Maxine. I am just hoping that you're all hearing this and feeling as inspired as I am. And just, it's been such a pleasure to connect with you, Maxine. Thank you.
Well, same with you. And I'll just say, I'm not this amazing, enlightened, wonderful person. I struggle every day.
Same.
Yeah, none of us is like, oh, everything's great and wonderful and I'm enlightened. Nah. No. I have to deal with anger and frustration and feeling like I failed, pretty much every day. So hang in there. And thank you so much for bringing the Selkie myth to other people with your beautiful art and your beautiful insights and your beautiful podcast. It's been so healing for me. I needed it because I used to play and sing that song all the time, and I haven't sung it in years, decades, until I sang it over at your house. You have no idea what that did for me. Thank you so much, Gwen.
Oh, my pleasure. Truly a joy, and just, yeah, so much love to you. Thank you.
What I loved about this discussion was that I was deeply inspired by Maxine's life of continually needing to trust her own perspective and inner direction in spite of the consequences and people on the outside not really understanding or supporting all the time. In fact, I saw how there were years of really learning to trust herself that built her up to then be able to do bigger, more meaningful work that required her to trust herself even more immensely with potentially higher risks and costs. And it was such an inspirational story to hear, to just remind myself to keep trusting myself as well. That oftentimes when we look outside of us to see, is everybody else thinking this is a good idea that I'm pursuing this path? Does everybody get it even? I loved that aspect of her story, that people didn't often get it when she was initially talking about what she was saying, what she was trying to create. And I so often have found myself really looking on the outside for validation and wanting to make sure, do people get it? Do they understand it? Even with this podcast, of just continuing to put the episodes out, have the discussions my heart and soul are calling out for, and not being sure how it's going to be received, I think is a really brave choice, both not just necessarily saying in myself, but in those that I watch as well. When we really hear that inner call and we stay aligned to it, it is so inspiring. And to me is such an embodiment of what it means to be connected to that soul skin or seal skin aspect of ourself, that we aren't just going to stay attached to the human world. We're also going to trust what we're seeing in the numinous world of the soul. So your inflow on fire bright idea for this episode is to ask yourself, what connects you to your soul? It's a big question, but breaking it down further, just looking at what daily habits or practices helped you to feel connected to your soul or your soul skin, your seal skin. And I think for myself, this is definitely where I've found daily meditation, daily journaling to be absolutely key to helping me feel connected. I also feel like just a lot of the practices that we talk about in this podcast, as far as watching for when feelings are coming up and asking questions and getting curious about them instead of just kind of surrendering and getting overwhelmed by them and not doing anything about it to really move through it has been game-changing to help me stay connected to my soul as well. I also love using tarot and oracle decks. I love listening to beautiful music, spending time out in nature. And absolutely, I feel more connected to my soul when I am laughing and enjoying myself. Like, there's such a strong connection there for me. So those are just some ideas to hopefully get the ball rolling for yourself. And please remember that all of our Inflow on Fire Bright ideas for every episode can be found in the study guide. And you can download that by accessing the link in the show notes. Also, if you would like to connect to Maxine directly, you can do that by emailing her at uwim, UWIM, at Juno, JUNO.com. You can also find her on Instagram at Mormon Feminisms. So I hope you enjoyed this discussion. I certainly did. And I'm cheering you on in reconnecting and staying really connected to your soul skin. In Flow and On Fire is a weekly podcast to help you find your flow and stoke your inner fire so that you can live more joyfully, create those big and beautiful dreams, and make the world a better place. Living in Flow on Fire isn't a destination, it's a daily practice. We make this show every week to help support you in that practice with deep inspirational insights and real-world examples of other soulful people who are leaning into this journey also. To better support your Inflow on Fire practice, we send you each week's episode via email direct to your inbox so you never miss a beat. Go to quincurtis.com/email to sign up and stay inspired. Also, when you sign up, you'll get access to my free Living in Flow and On Fire guide. A step-by-step path to find your flow and stoke your fire today. Sign up at quincurtis.com/email to amp up your inflow and on fire lifestyle with me now. This has been another episode of Inflow and On Fire, a weekly podcast cheering you on to follow your heart and come more alive. It can be tough to stay in flow and keep your creative fires burning bright, so please take this podcast with you on your journey. Subscribe so we can keep fanning your flames and cheering you on each week. If you got something out of this episode and haven't already left us a review, please do. Positive reviews really help other people who need this to find it also. I'm your host, Quinn Curtis, artist, mother of 5, and aspiring children's book author illustrator. I'm here creating this show because I know just how hard it can be to even just stay excited and engaged in our everyday lives. With so many demands for our time and attention, it can be especially tricky to prioritize those nudges from our heart and soul. However, the costs, like depression, disconnection, anxiety, overwhelm, loneliness, lack of fulfillment, and so much more, are really high when we don't. So every week I gather soulful stories, inspiring ideas, and incredible people to help us stay connected to our inner compass and remember what's most important. Ultimately, I created this show because I need those regular reminders too, but my hope is it can also inspire and help you to keep going and bring more of your magic that's inside of you out into the world. We need it. Special thanks to Avesa and Maddie Love for our theme music. Thank you so much for listening, friend. In between now and when we connect again, stay in flow on fire. It matters, and you matter.